Over 1 million cinema lovers have already subscribed to Film Companion. What are you waiting for? Hit the bell icon and join our film family. Hey everyone, welcome back to FC Retake. Rahul, it's so nice to be doing this in person again.
I know, same here. Second in person after Abne last time.
Second in person, and I just thought that it's funny, घूम फिर के हम रणबीर कपूर की फिल्म पे ही आ जाते हैं.
This, did not occur to me till I started watching it. I was like, oh God, same old thing.
Indeed. So we are going to be trolled. It's fine. We're good. So in the run-up to Gangubai, Rahul and I are revisiting a film that Sanjay, Leela, Bhansali made with a lot of love, but it didn't receive that love back from the audience. I'm talking about Saawariya. So, Rahul, what was the retake for you like?
Very interesting because I was very young when I watched it. I was only 20 or so, and I remember Saawariya and Om Shanti Om released in the same week, and
it was a massive clash.
Massive clash, and the aftershocks were felt forever. But I was a big Om Shanti Om fan then, and Saawariya didn't really hit me. I don't know, because I was really looking forward to his next film after Black. Black is one of my all-time favorite Hindi films. Of course, I found out later about its problems, but I waited for Saawariya. I was fairly disappointed back when I watched it. Also, I didn't know anyone in it. First time I'm seeing Ranbir, first time I'm seeing Sonam.
Correct.
All very new back in 2007.
Yeah.
But first time, after that first time, I watched it again for retake.
Me too.
15 years.
Yeah.
That's insane.
And it's amazing what a difference it makes.
It makes such a big difference, and I'm like, oh God, did I grow a brain? Why am I seeing so much in it suddenly? Why am I like? And that made me very grateful for the job we do, because if not for that gaze, I would not have been able to see so much more in the film this time. That's not to say I loved it or anything, but I found it very
compelling.
I found it very interesting.
Yeah.
Like, and it's so apt that I found it weird as watching it on my TV, of course. And I found it apt that now that we are returning to theaters and all, we are discussing a Bhansali film again.
So that's so interesting, Rahul, because I had almost exactly the same reaction, right? I can't say I loved it because it still takes too long. It is a wisp of a story that is just stretched and stretched. It is based on a short story by Dostoevsky, but I found so much that's intriguing, the world building, the politics of it, in the kind of, the fact that there's characters who are Hindu, there are characters who are Muslim, there's a character who's Christian, and they all live in harmony. The kind of place he has in this world for Rani Mukherjee's character, Gulabji, who is a sex worker, and how she's the narrator. She says ख्वाबों का शहर, and the way Rahul, he sets you up for it, because it begins with Rani's voiceover saying ये ख्वाबों का शहर है जहाँ जो कहीं और नहीं except मेरे ख्यालों. So he set you up कि now don't go saying कि भैया gondola क्यों है, ये कौन दिए क्यों जल रहे हैं, all of that. It was remarkable, and this is Umang Kumar as an art director just letting loose.
I think it was quite something, like for 2007.
Absolutely.
Also, Bhansali was in this sort of colonial period phase after Black. I saw the succession, the natural progression of his oeuvre, and as far as the world building is concerned, I found it very interesting that they took Rani as a sex worker, and the entire film starts with her voiceover, which is very different from Black, where her entire film was spent trying to speak.
Correct.
Where she was mute. And so I just thought there was so much of Bhansali in, like, if I have to direct anyone to Bhansali's filmography to know a little more about, I'd still choose this film, because there's a lot of before and there's a lot of after in this particular film. Because if you look at it only from Sonam's perspective in this film, the heroine's perspective, it's a reverse Hum Dil Do Chuke Sanam, right?
Correct.
Like in a very strange way, except she goes back to the person she's in love with, and and then I also looked at it as almost like the second film in the sex worker trilogy, because you had supporting characters, Madhuri in Devdas, you had Rani in this, and now we have Alia coming out as the protagonist in Gangubai. So there were so many obsessions of
Bhansali
in this, and I like that we can see that pattern. Back then it felt like it was a sort of almost like it stood out like a sore thumb almost, but now when I'm looking at it, I think it belongs right where it does.
Yeah. No, and you know, look at the sort of the of course the blue palette, which became just the punchline in a million jokes.
Memes weren't around then, but I can imagine.
You can imagine. It was of course famously called a blue film. But you know, the whole sort of, and there's this very interesting conversation between Rani and Zora Sehgal, and they're both in blue. So it's like blues everywhere. The whole movement of the camera behind the characters as, you know, Sonam runs. That, first of all, his obsession with these women running with the swirling fabric and slow motion and the hair, and you can see that whole thing, you know, kind of solidifying. And also in between all of this, Rahul, the kind of paying homage to the RK legacy. You know, that Ranbir's name is Ranbir Raj, which was of course Raj Kapoor's name. You know, then there's that whole moment when he's holding her like this and she's tipping over, and there's RK bar flashing right behind, and that's the iconic Raj Kapoor Nargis pose. And so he's weaving in film history. There's another moment when Ranbir says, you know, he says, क्या तुमने कभी किसी से प्यार किया है, and which is of course straight cut to Rishi Kapoor in Cars. You know, there's just these lovely little things that he does, but I just feel like one of the fatal flaws is the length. The length,
I mean, it was fairly normal for a film
for
back
that
then,
time.
I guess.
Correct.
I felt the length this time, obviously. Also the indulgence, you know, like just going overboard, like, of course, there was a merging of so many universes there. Like, you know, you saw black production design, you saw the Devdas, a bit of Devdas, you saw a bit of Ram Leela with, you know, Sonam's character. And as the length was eventually a problem, because if you look at it purely as a celebration of Bollywood, I thought it was a very romantic film about Bollywood itself, because something occurred to me while I was watching it this time. It's like, the entire point of putting Salman as a character, first of all, Salman Khan was in a weird state of flux back then in his career, right? He had just finished the 90s, where he had established himself as the superstar and as one of the three Khans, and he was doing a bunch of romantic films and romantic comedies in this era before Wanted came in 2008.
Correct. That phase hadn't begun.
The action hero phase hadn't begun. The Salman phase hadn't begun. So I found it very interesting that it was almost prophetic, because you put Salman in this film as the character who's barely there, who's not seen but who's won Sonam's heart. And I looked at it as almost like an ode to the fading superstars of Bollywood, because the culture was back then, it was on its way out after the 90s. And I just felt like, you know, by putting a character who's barely there, but still the heroine being in love with him is also our relationship with the superstars right now. They are barely there. They hardly do any films in the last 10 or 15 years. But, you know, there's a place in a heart that keeps going back to them. And that's why I felt like Ranbir's character was very smart. It wasn't just a homage to the RK era. I felt like there was a reaction, in the sense he was trying to embody a superstar from the 60s. Almost the first superstar. And it was almost a reaction to win Sonam's heart. And it just like these things.
There's also a bit of Shammi Kapoor in him.
There was. So he was basically embodying another era to compete with this modern era superstar, and she goes to this modern era superstar. So that link from one era to another, I found very when you actually zoom back and look at the film past its flaws and all, this felt nice. Like the short story was adapted in a very the cultural translation was pretty nice.
You know what else it was prophetic about? Salman saying कि मैं देश के लिए काम करता हूँ. So cut to एक था tiger.
Of course. And he had that role, right? He said he works for the government in this.
Right.
And you know, relationships are my weakness.
Correct.
We don't know what he does.
Correct.
And this is Ekta Tiger in a period setting. And I love that all the characters have their own stories. The only difference is he chose a perspective of Ranbir Kapoor, obviously. But if he chose Sonam's perspective, it would be Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam. If he chose Salman's, it would be Ekta Tiger. So, you know, and you know, I was actually surprised. I did not like Ranbir Kapoor a lot in this film. I felt like he was trying.
I loved him.
He was trying too hard. Like I
get
it. There was a brief.
Yeah, there was a brief.
There was a brief.
It was the hero launch.
The hero launch, right? And sure, there were. But I actually really liked Sonam this time.
Did you?
I did. I thought she had the best amongst the debuts that weekend. And you know, there was Deepika and Om Shanti Om, there were two of these people, and you know, even her enunciation, her diction was very different back then. She did sound like Sakina for a long period of time. You know that the urban diction came later in her career. You know, where she could not get out of that. So then she started playing those roles. But this, we didn't know anything about her. So and this went on to Delhi 6, where she used her face very well. Where filmmakers knew how to shoot her in songs and to make a character out of her music, out of the music she's in.
But Rahul, didn't you feel, for me, Sakina was the weakest link in terms of the way the character is written, not how she performed it, but just the way, like, just this swoony girl who, that's all she does is kind of pine and yearn, and there's nothing more to her. You know, Gulabji had so much more, of course, so much more fire and zest and just pizzazz, you know. For me, Sakina was like just so almost underwritten in a sense, like he didn't flesh her out in any discernible way. You know, but you said songs, and some of those songs are just magic.
Absolutely.
Just Monty Sharma, what a miracle!
Really, and you know, I was a big fan of the black theme, and I remember Monty Sharma's name so well. And when I watched this film, I only remembered this film through its songs. And the way, of course, the way they are shot and all is one thing. Like every frame, he goes overboard with making every frame a painting. I get that, and Sonam's character was part of the painting in most of.
All that's why time.
They were. That's why it felt so weakly written. And but you know, the Mashallah song especially, which was my favorite of the film. I just felt it. You see Sonam's face for the first time there. Ranbir's already come by then. He's sung a song with the sex workers. Won everyone's heart. And then there's this. I love the way Bhansali times his moments according to the music, you know, because he did it in black too, when there was no song as per se, but there was a scene where the mother, for the first time, who Shehnaz Patel I think plays the mother, for the first time notices that her child is learned how to you know, put meaning to the words in the garden when Amitabh Bachchan is, you know, and there's an exact moment where in that scene the violin starts playing when the first tear falls from the mother's.
Oh, it's all choreographed.
It's so choreographed and so beautiful, because it really knows how to pull the right strings. It's the same thing here, because Sonam's face comes exactly when he says Mashallah at one point, and I was like, okay, this is and back then I was going through the phase where I wanted to be a filmmaker. Like I was actually doing a film course in Bombay, and we were being taught a lot of how to shoot films and all, and I was like, this is what I want to make. Like this and Om Shanti Om came on the same weekend. I was like, good that they came on the same weekend, because they've inspired me to at least do something with films in the future, because it had been a while since we had seen two massive silver screen films look like that and feel like that.
But my favorite was Jab Se Tere Naina.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, it is such a stunning song, and
the towel.
And the towel, the famous towel dropping sequence. And you know, it's again very interesting, because the eroticism in this film is completely with Ranbir. With Sonam, you see her back because the blouses are cut a certain way. There's that one scene where her leg is a little bit exposed for Iman, the Salman Khan character. But the objectification is clearly of Ranbir, and I was like, my God. And he was just, for me, just, you know, so joyous. There was something so joyous about him. And I think that's why even at the end, despite the fact that it doesn't end with him getting together with Sonam, the joy still remains. You know, there's and again it speaks to that whole Bhansali kind of obsession with the love triangle, which of course started with Hum Dil De Chuke and continues Devdas and all Padmavat. You know, all these films have the same kind of so actually I was thinking that Karan Johar's sort of Ek Tarfa Pyar was the first time Ranbir did it was here.
I mean, this was Ek Tarfa Pyar, it was Heartbreak, it was and it was an era of love triangles, you know, back then, and you know, there was Kalo Now before that, and I really liked that as much as I didn't like Ranbir's sort of take on the character in the first half of the film. I saw the Raj Kapoor breaking and the Ranbir Kapoor sort of emerging in the second half.
Right.
You know, that toxic, I don't need your consent, I'm going to pull you to me person, the man-child in him.
It was sort of
that we saw
Avara-esque.
later came, Avara-esque, it came towards the second half of the film. That's when I started seeing that this is the guy, this is the new actor that everyone's talking about. Because, and of course we saw him do those roles over the years, which he became famous for. But that transformation, where even Rani Mukherjee's character says that, you know, it took 2 days. 2 days changed his life. He went from that spirited, joyous person to this dark person who needed to be loved. And I found that very interesting, because again, you know, so many prophetic things, and Ranbir Kapoor's career went exactly the same way after that. That broke and this came out, and I just thought that the Zora Sehgal character also, who I really liked in this, like I mean, there's Lily Pop, and there's a lot of spirit in her, but even the way she has these old woman mumbles, you know, she keeps mumbling to herself, like again, as you said, you know, there's there are Hindus, Muslims and Christian characters in this, and I just thought she did it so well, because that house was a character. There was a Mona Lisa sort of face on the curtain in that house where Ranbir stays, which is quite something, because Jab Se Tere Naina was shot with the Mona Lisa very prominent. And of course her eyes are so famous for being so ambiguous. So I just thought that she really melded into that environment in a very strange way. Like I thought that, okay, I get it, you're going a little overboard, you know, we see this old woman in most films and all, but I just thought there was a lot of affection towards the character.
And you know, the thing is, it's so sad that, so he really tried, okay, he really tried, and yes, it doesn't work, and it still doesn't work. 15 years later, also the film doesn't work. But I just feel like the backlash this film got was just so vicious and so unnecessary. And you know, now in retrospect, it seems just so like almost like really, really nasty bullying.
Do you remember a lot of it? Because I wasn't.
It was awful. It was awful. You know, because also remember, and this was so I had to sort of take a step back. It was produced by Sony Pictures. So it was, you know, the Columbia woman standing with the torch is the first thing you see, right? So it was the first studio Bollywood film. You know, and this whole battle between Saawariya and OSO was pitched as local versus, you know, global. It became this massive thing, and you know, of course, Shah Rukh was very sort of almost belligerent in that, you know, I'm going to show you what the local boy can do. You know, and oh my god, and of course the film didn't connect with anyone. Whereas OSO connected with everyone. And how do you pitch this against a film like that, which is funny and interesting and just
desi
at its heart, at its core, it's so desi. I remember it was just completely annihilated. And about a year later, I remember writing an article for the New York Times about how the studios have stumbled in Bollywood because none of them managed to make a film that worked. And I remember I interviewed Michael Linton, who was then the chairman of Sony Pictures, and I said, what did you learn? And he said to me that I learned that you don't go up against Shah Rukh Khan no matter what your product is. And I said, that is a good lesson.
That's quite, I was absolutely bereft of this context, of course, because for me they were just two films. It was like the Broadway musical, right? It was to the Om Shanti Om sort of Desi celebration of Bollywood. Again, both were celebrations of Hindi cinema, which was quite something, and I mean, I was quite taken by the entire contest that they had put out there. I just didn't know how bitter it got later. Of course, I have a feeling it would have been equally nasty this time if it had come out now too.
Really? You don't think it would connect even today?
No, I don't think it would connect. It would be labeled many things, including pretentious and indulgent and all. And of course, we are more opinionated cinephiles, the social media. It tends to get bad. We've seen it with a lot of films recently. So, for better or worse, I think it did come out in the last possible phase of, you know, like being able to sort of survive the whole thing. And I'm glad that people do look back, because if you noticed, we got so many suggestions saying do
look
Saawariya, which I was so surprised with. I was like, out of all the films, really. And I'm glad, because we did find a lot in it.
So you heard FC Retake. Rahul and I think there's so much to discover in Saawariya. I suggest you go back and give it a second chance, and please continue to suggest films you want us to discuss the next time. Put them down in the comments below.